So years ago, the song that I'm singing tonight, Carrie wrote the poem, I wrote the music, and I recorded it on my keyboard with different sounds. And I don't know who found Tamara, but she scored it for me because I don't read music, I don't write music, I don't look at music. So she scored it, and then we recorded it with her and two other Jewish musicians at Provo, and then she played at me in her spring concert at high school. So it was just, I mean, pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is.
I know. Absolutely. I have another song I need her to score.
Okay.
The other one I was going to sing.
People have to do it.
Yeah. Hey, do you have an order of service?
Oh, no. Good evening, everybody. I'm Pastor Kevin Little. For those of you who might not know me, I'm the directing pastor of this church and so many others, or just two others. But I thank you all for coming here this evening to hear what Bill has to say about his experiences. I'm going to invite Terry up to give us pertinent information and things we need to know here and get us moving right along.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm Carrie Frank, and I've been a Christian a very, very long time. And I started volunteering for the Jewish Federation, for the Holocaust Center at the Jewish Federation. And along the way, I met a very special person, and you're going to meet him tonight, Dr. Bill Gingold. And he said, hey, you know what? I'd love to get into the churches, and I'd love to speak to the youth in churches. Can you help me? And I said, well, let's try. And you know what? You're our very first one. And so we're going to do an event next Sunday too, but you're our very first one. So thank you, Pastor Kevin, for allowing us to come tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And before I introduce Angie, who you probably know, I want to tell you how special this is. In the world today, do you know the number 6 million? What's that number? Well, what does that number mean? Means a lot of money. It's the Holocaust. It's how many Jewish lives were lost. Not just lost, were killed on purpose. 6 million. But I want to give you another number. It's 245,000. That's how many Holocaust survivors are alive on Earth right now. Just 245,000. And of them, only 40% are male. And we have one in our congregation right now, and it's Bill. So you're going to meet Bill, you're going to hear his story, you're going to be a witness. And we encourage you to keep learning and to tell others what you are learning about. Bill, Dr. Bill Gingold, is a medical doctor. He's retired now, but he was a medical doctor. He's a businessman. He's married to Phyllis. He has kids and grandchildren. So before we bring Bill up, I wanted to make you aware of three things. Afterwards, we have a table right in the back at the end of this aisle, and there's books for sale. The books were written by Dr. Gingold's nephew, and they're $18 each, and they go into a lot more detail than Dr. Gingold can say tonight. And so you can write a check or give cash, and all that money goes to the Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee. He doesn't keep any of it. He doesn't need any money. The second thing is the feedback form. You each got a half sheet of paper, feedback form. We would love your comments on here. And if you have more to say, write on the back. And put these feedback forms in that basket on the back of the table, on that back table. Or give it to me or to Dr. Gingold or Pastor Kevin. But we would love for you to be thinking as Dr. Gingold is talking and writing down the answers to these questions. And the third thing is Bill and I want to go everywhere. We want to go to your school. But again, we want to go to the local library. We want to go to your community groups. We don't charge. He doesn't charge anything. I'm retired. I volunteer. I don't charge anything. So I put my business card as a volunteer on that back table. And please, if you think of a place where they need to hear Dr. Gingold speak, get my card and contact me and let me know. And it would be wonderful. We would love that. So now I want to introduce Angie. And a long time ago, I can't stray from the mic. Many, many years ago, I wrote a poem about the Holocaust, about children in the Holocaust. And it's hard enough when adults were killed. But when little children who haven't done anything wrong are killed just because they're Jewish, it was really difficult for me. And I needed to express myself. And so I made little quilts and I wrote poetry. Well, then I showed Angie one of my poems and she put it to music. And the first line of this poem is called Darling, Precious Little One, with nowhere safe to hide. And so Angie's going to play that for us and sing it. So thank you.
Darling, precious little one, with nowhere safe to hide. If I were near, I'd give my life. With God we would abide. I'd sing to you so tenderly and wrap you warm and tight, where none could ever harm you. I'd watch both day and night. With kisses, strength, and outstretched arms, you must to God belong. You're safe with Him, take rest, my heart. To Him you sing your song. With kisses, strength, and outstretched arms, you must to God belong. You're safe with Him, take rest, my heart. To Him you sing your song.
I do everything in slow motion. I'm an old guy, okay? Okay. the music that you just heard, I was informed not too long ago that my youngest daughter helped in the composition of it.
Yeah, she scored it.
Scored it?
Played it. She
Yeah.
heard it, scored it.
So very close ties here. Thank you. Okay. My name is Baruch Gingold. Baruch is a Hebrew name. It's also a Yiddish name. Baruch in Hebrew means bless you. So I was very fortunate in a number of ways to be blessed, to not only be here, but to be born and survive a terrible situation called the Holocaust. All of the people's names that I'll share with you, and some of the pictures as well, were my immediate family, and all of them are deceased. And so I apologize, I'll have to sit down periodically. My spine doesn't allow me to stand up too long. So in case you're aware or concerned about it. And not being a tech person, I'll do the best I can with this little device here. All right. Let's see if, just to let you know, I'll be skipping a lot of the slides because I can talk on forever and ever kind of thing. The Holocaust was a terribly long period, especially for the Jewish people. It started around 1933 and even before that, and lasted until Nazi Germany was defeated in the Second World War, which was in 1945. And unfortunately, some of the vestiges of the reason why the Jewish people had such a difficult time, unfortunately, continues today. And so we need to be sensitive to that as well. As Carrie mentioned, 6 million Jewish people died. And this, for some of you that read various children's books, and this is an adult book as well, Anne Frank was a teenager that unfortunately was killed in the concentration camp. And she maintained a diary for a long period of time. And after the war, that diary was published. And many of you might have read that particular book, publication by Anne Frank. Most of my family, I apologize, my memory isn't as good as it used to be a few years ago. So I have to look at the slides so I don't get distracted and I kind of can move along. All of my immediate family was killed during the Second World War. Just a couple of terms that I might be using periodically. One is called anti-Semitism, which is really a hatred of the Jewish people. And by most people that have that hatred don't know any Jewish people, ironically. The second is a stereotype, and we always have to kind of be sensitive how we stereotype people, whether it's by their skin color, by their religion, by how much money they make, et cetera, et cetera. And then genocide is an intentional effort to kill a lot of people because of certain characteristics. And by the way, we have genocides currently going on in quite a few countries. This is kind of a very brief outline. I'll try to touch some of the items here, but we won't be able to do all of them. And being a slow talker, probably I'll be able to touch on fewer than normally. So anyway, let me move on here. I'll skip this. I want to introduce you to my parents. My mom's name was Leah. She was about 5'2" in height. I'm just guessing. I have never asked my mother how much she weighed when she was that age. So I don't know, but I would guess maybe 120, 130 pounds. And my dad was about 6'2". And let me just tell you a little bit about each one of them. Aside from them being my parents, they were also the reason why we survived the Holocaust. My mom was a very quiet person, never went to school. She worked. Both of my parents were blue-collar workers. My mom worked in a bakery pretty much all her life, before the war and after the war. My dad worked in a seltzer factory before the war, and after the war he worked at a steel mill pretty much all of his life. My mom, like I indicated to you, never went to school, but she was a very bright woman. She very seldom talked in terms of raising her voice. She was very intelligent in trying to pick up cues from people in terms of what their thinking and behavior might be. And most of the time, she was pretty correct. She had wonderful control on my dad. Not unusual, huh? Okay. The other strength my mom had is she was very well mentally organized. She could think what problems were cropping up and came up with alternate solutions, and then took actions to implement the solution that she thought would work best for the situation that we were in. My dad, I have to stereotype him a little bit. He was a hyperactive adult. He was always in motion, physically, mentally. He had a fourth grade education, so he was educated. And again, a few of the strengths of my dad, like any other parent, they have weaknesses as well, but I'll accentuate the strength here. My dad was a risk taker, but he was a planned risk taker. He could anticipate things so well, and very similar to my mom, was able to kind of sort through what might be some potential solutions and then go with it in terms of risk taking. And he also had leadership qualities, which was very helpful because he was able to organize a lot of things when we were in difficult situations. So I'll come back to these two characters as I talk a little more. Yeah. Just to give you a little brief flavor in terms of Jewish people, here are some values that trace back thousands of years upon thousands of years for the Jewish people. And very few are really aware of many of these values. And just to go through, we believe in one God, which many other people do. We believe in loving your others as you love yourself. We believe in the Ten Commandments, and just like any other group of people, we take the Ten Commandments in stride in different ways, where we practice some more than we practice others. We also, as part of our faith and culture and values, don't believe in vengeance. And, just for your information, after the war was over and 6 million Jews were murdered, there wasn't one incident that the Jewish people took vengeance on the Nazis. We have a strong belief in equality and equity, and we have a term called Tikkun Olam, which goes back a couple of thousand years ago, which basically is a Hebrew term, which means you need to practice repairing the world, because we always have problems. And then finally, we have a belief in justice, respect, and let me emphasize the term learning. That's a universal concept in Judaism, is that you encourage everyone to learn as much as they can, whether it's formal or informal. And just so you know, as I mentioned to you, my parents, one never went to school, and one went only to 4th grade, and I was very fortunate that they kicked my hinder to get educated. Okay? And that's kind of almost a universal thing in the Jewish value system. So anyway, this was my older brother, Sam, and I just want to, he was about 6 years, a little more than 6 years older than I was, and just to let you know, when we were going through our trials during a very difficult period, my brother was the one that was trying to teach me different things once I got past my 3rd birthday, if you will. Before that, he didn't bother with me at all. Okay. Anyway, he was one of the youngsters, just like hundreds and thousands of other ones that were under the age of, let's say, 12, 13, that weren't required to do forced labor, that was able to help in terms of digging tunnels in order to reach people from the Polish resistance or Polish smugglers to exchange different things to get food. So kids his age were the primary tunnelers in a place called the Warsaw Ghetto, and I'll talk about that shortly. Anyway, another job he had was in the Warsaw Ghetto. Kids his age, maybe a little older, were required to pick up the dying bodies, or the corpse, basically, and to put them on carts and remove them from that ghetto area. So I'll come back to him because he was quite a character. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'd like to introduce you to a couple, some other people. On the left there, the young woman's name is Chava. She was the younger sister of my mother. She was about 17 years of age at that time. The fellow in the middle is her younger brother, who was called Troyam. Both of those are Yiddish names. And then my tough-looking dad was on the right side, and he was a tough son of a gun. Anyway, we were very fortunate that my aunt and uncle was with us because they helped save my life. Okay. Nazis invade Poland September 1st, 1939, which is the start of the Second World War. And basically the siege of Warsaw, and let me just mention a couple of things about Warsaw. Warsaw was and still is the capital of Poland. Warsaw, at that time, and still is, one of the cultural capitals in Europe. They were very sophisticated in almost every area, whether it was science, or fine arts, technology, sewer systems, etc. So I'll come back to Warsaw because we were there for quite a while. Anyway, the attack on Poland was very short-lived. The Polish military didn't have the organization, the capabilities, the military capabilities to fight the Nazi. Just to give you an example, the Polish military, in some cases, were still using horses and swords and pistols to try to fight against tanks, airplanes, and artillery. So the war was very short-lived, is what I'm telling you. Okay? Okay. I was born September 20th, 1939, right in the middle of the attack on Poland, in terms of particularly Warsaw. And this is just, I guess, an obstetric ward at the hospital. I can't vouch whether this was the real obstetric ward that I was born in, but that just gives you a little picture of what it might look like. And then Lily on September 20th basically said the baby is coming faster than the Germans. I told you she was pretty organized. Okay, do something. Okay, what am I doing right? There we go. This is actually the bombed out hospital that I was born in. And it was bombed one day after I was removed from the hospital, which was one day after I was born. Now remember what I told you about my dad and mom. My dad was already anticipating something nasty happening in Warsaw. So he was already anticipating that as soon as I was born, they had to get out of Warsaw. So with the help of my aunt and uncle, they took Lily and baby, or Leah and baby. I always called my mom Lily. That's American style. Okay. And they fled. Oh, okay, do something here. Okay, here we go. We started to escape from Warsaw with thousands upon thousands of other people, both Jewish as well as Polish, and probably some other nationalities. So basically, remember I mentioned to you that my dad had a fourth grade education? He also had a phenomenal memory. And one of the things apparently he learned in school was geography. And as soon as the Germans started invading, Nazi Germany started invading Warsaw, he was trying to figure out where we go. And basically, my mother said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "The Germans are marching from the west, we're going to head east." Okay. Okay, did I lose it totally? Okay. And without, that just shows the gray area where the Russians were, and the kind of light pink area where the Germans were. And basically what my parents, my aunt and uncle, my brother, and me, we headed east to get away from the oncoming Nazi military forces. And this is just a picture of it. Okay, once our goal was to reach the Russian encampments, military encampments, which were still in eastern Poland. And lo and behold, it took us a while to get to them. Plus, again, I'm just emphasizing our family, but it was happening to thousands upon thousands of other people at the same time. So when we reached the Russian encampments, and again, they were called the Soviet Union at that time, so I'll use that interchangeably because it's easier to say Russian than the Soviet Union. Anyway, we reached the Russian encampments, and lo and behold, they put us on trucks. And the trucks are German trucks. And of course, these trucks take us back to Warsaw. The reason for that, at that point in time, Nazi Germany and Russia had a non-aggression treaty in place, which meant basically they wouldn't go to war with each other or try to kill each other. So the Russians were honoring that non-aggression treaty. So all of the people that came from occupied Nazi Germany property at this point in time were put on trucks to take them back to. So that was a misfortune of not only the Gingolds, but thousands of other people, mostly Jewish. Okay, I think I skipped something. Okay. I apologize. This is my not my best scene here. Okay. There was a place in Warsaw, an enclave, which had a concentration of Jewish people. Even though Warsaw, Poland had a population of about 1.2 1.3 million people, about 30% of the population in Warsaw were Jewish. But just like the times and other countries in similar patterns, where certain either religious group or ethnic groups are located in different parts of communities. In Warsaw, they had various locations throughout Warsaw that were concentrated, a concentration of Jewish people only. And the Warsaw Ghetto wound up being one of those major ones. Anyway, we were brought back to Warsaw and put in this enclave, which later was built, it turned out to be the Warsaw Ghetto after they built a brick wall around that community. And basically, we were in a room, my aunt, uncle, my dad, mom, my older brother, me, one room, no mattresses, no heat, no light, etc. We had to share basically common toilets, water area, and suddenly the food dried up once you were in the ghetto area. Okay, do something magic here. Here we go. Well, let me mention a little bit about the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto, at any given point in time, had between 300,000 and 450,000 people in it once it was enclosed, which meant, based on the dictates of Nazi Germany, they would control all of the activities, particularly the nutritional activities of the people in the ghetto. By this I mean they wanted to starve the people inside the ghetto. So the point I just want to make is that in this small enclave, there were just a lot of people. Just to give you kind of a sampling. On the average, let me say, in this enclosure, anywhere around 4,000 people died a day. About half of them died due to starvation. And coming back to my older brother, one of the things that he did was go through tunnels and try to meet up with some of the Polish resistance fighters or Polish smugglers to exchange different goods for food. Because the most critical part of the problem within the ghetto was starvation. So just to give you an example, the caloric intake, in other words, the number of calories that the people on the average received or were able to smuggle in was about 300. How many calories do you think a Big Mac is? No, well, not quite that high. It's probably about 800. Okay. So one of the things that happens is when you go below 2,000 calories on the average a day, you start losing a lot of weight, and eventually the lower the caloric intake is, the worse it gets in terms of weight loss, and it reaches a point of starvation. And it happens relatively quickly. But anyway, so starvation was a good portion of the problem as to why people died in the ghetto. In addition, without belaboring too many things, there weren't any medical supplies available. There was also harm to people by the Nazi military, etc. But you can see that there is a list, and we don't have the time to, talk about all of that stuff. But it was a very harsh life. And, on one occasion, I think my mother, who had a baby with her, I had a question. How did your mother keep you alive? That was a hell of a good question. Well, one, I was very fortunate. I was breastfed for a hell of a long time, which was good. In addition, one of the things all of the people in the ghetto would receive were some rations. Remember, 300 calories worth. She would save some of that and grind it up and use that for food for me. The other thing, is I'll come back to it later, my dad and my aunt and uncle, because they wound up being in forced labor, they would get additional rations so they could live longer to do work. And they would bring it back to my mother to share. So she would have some more nutrition, so I could be breastfed better, et cetera, et cetera. So it was kind of, how do you balance things out for survival? One of the things that happened in this ghetto is that, jump back, I told you Warsaw was a very advanced city. They actually had a public health department. And in the early part of the war, the Nazi regime would allow the nurses from the Warsaw Public Health Department come into the Warsaw ghetto. And and one of the things, a few of them did, and I don't know what percentage, they would approach parents of very young children and basically say, just looking at what's happening, the survival rate in the ghetto is not good. What maybe I can do as a righteous nurse is, let me take your child and I'll have the child adopted by a Christian family. Or if that's not possible, we would smuggle that child out to another country where the Nazis were still not in control. One of the unfortunate problems with that is that boys were at a disadvantage to be adopted out. And just so you know, the reason for that is one of the Jewish rituals, if you will, is that before the child reaches the 8th day after their birth, they're circumcised. And of course, that was one of the first things that the Nazis would do with males, is to have them lower their drawers to see if they were circumcised. That was how they identified the Jewish men and children, the boys, not the girls, the boys. Okay, so it was almost impossible to get a Jewish boy adopted by a Christian family. Only girls were adopted. Okay. All kinds of stories behind that, but we don't have the time. Let me come back to this woman here. Oh, sorry. This was one of the nurses, Polish nurses, and because of her skills and abilities to help people make choices, she was able to save about 2,500 Jewish children. She's one of the people that the Jewish people consider as righteous. Of course, let me come back to the other folks like my aunt and uncle and my dad. And anybody else that was over the age of 12 or looked like they're in pretty good shape as a youngster, they were requested every morning to come out of the buildings and stand on the streets, and the Nazis would put them in trucks. So every morning, whether it was 6, 7, or so, they would put these folks in the trucks, and these trucks would leave the Warsaw Ghetto and take all of these people to different factories, manufacturing plants, etc., for slave labor. So if you were your age, all of you would be working as slave laborers. I'm assuming that most of you are older than 12 years of age. Okay? And you would be working starting very early in the morning and work until about 6, 7 in the evening, and then you would be brought back and you would receive rations of about 500 calories. Not even half of McDonald's. Okay? Shortly, this slide might be a little out of sequence. The Warsaw Ghetto was established pretty much in early 1940. It had a square area of about 1.5 square mile, which is about 12, 13 blocks by 12, 13 blocks, if you look at a given community. So if you look at Fisher, if you go 12 blocks one way, 12 blocks another way, and you square it off, that's the size of the Warsaw Ghetto. Okay? Can you imagine 400,000 people in that square? So,
Fisher has 2,000 people in total.
yeah. So anyway, this is just a picture. It's hard to see here, but the area, well, there's a little square in the upper right-hand corner, which is about 2.4% of the total area of Warsaw, which would be the large square. And in that square of 2.5%, 30% of the population of Warsaw were in. That picture is kind of an outdoors picture of how many people were on the street. Very difficult time. And again, a couple of these slides might be a little bit out of sequence. A brick wall was built around this Jewish enclave, which turned out to be the Warsaw Ghetto. And the people that built the wall were people from inside the ghetto. And the wall was anywhere from 10 to 12 feet high with barbed wire on top and shards of glass. So the whole intent was to keep all of these people inside and starve them to death. And they were relatively successful, unfortunately. 20 minutes? Okay, I have to talk faster. Okay, all right. I'm going to have to skip a lot of slides. Again, this is another picture of Warsaw. I always ask this dumb question. It's hard to tell how old these folks are. But if you notice on the right side there, there is a youngster that's smiling. He probably is about your age. Remember what I described, their living environment? Okay. Why would this kid be smiling? Huh? Take a guess. If you were there, put yourself in there. Why would you smile? Sorry? Forced. Okay. How was he forced? Okay. Let me explain to you. Most of the photography, most of the films, like 99% of them, were taken by Nazi soldiers. And every Nazi soldier usually had either a machine gun or a pistol that they carried. And if the photographer is a Nazi soldier and he says, smile, what would you do? You would smile. Okay. Oh, I have to talk faster. Here's another youngster. One of the attempts that my dad and some other people led was to try to go through the sewers of Warsaw, very sophisticated sewers. And unfortunately, someone left the sewer cover ajar, and the Nazi patrols noticed that. And as soon as they did that, they machine gunned into the sewers. And the Gingolds plus some other families were fortunate enough to get back to their living quarters. This is a layout of the Nazi, the ghetto area. And if you look at the heavy lines there, you'll also notice there are some spots. I can't point to it. It's not working for me right now. The cemeteries surround a good portion of that enclave. And that's where most of the tunnels tried to get to, was to the cemeteries. And that's usually where the connection was made with either Polish resistance fighters or Polish smugglers, that they connect, and the Jewish people inside could provide whatever tangible stuff in exchange for food. And my brother was one of those collectors and tunnelers, etc. Now, just to give you an example, my parents used their wedding rings to get food. So it was a pretty common thing until you gave up all of the valuable assets that you possibly had, except your body. So anyway, our next attempt was to go through these tunnels, and we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. And we traveled, and again, due to my dad's, I'll call it leadership, he knew exactly where we needed to go and travel. And my uncle, Froyam, became kind of the scout as we were traveling, going east again towards Russia. And what he would do is go to farmers' houses and probably just knock on their doors and say, we're a group of a Jewish family here, can you help us? Most of them said no, because they were afraid for themselves. Because if the Nazi patrols caught them helping a Jewish person, they would get the same treatment as a Jewish person. But there were some farmers that took the risk, and by the way, these were notices that basically said there is reward money if you turn in Jews. And here is, another one of the righteous folks who just helped because she felt it was the right thing to do. Okay. This is a saying from one of the major Jewish writings, which is called the Talmud, aside from the Bible itself, that basically says whoever saves a single life is as if one saves the entire world. And unfortunately, we didn't have as many righteous folks at that time as we should have had. And anyway, I have to move on here. We traveled pretty extensively to try to get to the Russian borders. And at that point in time, when we got to the Russian borders, Russia and Germany were at war. So we were put on Russian trucks instead of German trucks this time. And the Russian trucks took us to trains like this. And those trains took us to northern Siberia, to the Russian lumber camps in Siberia. And this is where I had my first memory as a child. I was a little bit, I think, a little older than 3 years of age at that point. And one of the memories I have is some soldier with a weapon taking me off the boxcar and putting me onto the ground. Interestingly enough, I learned a little later as I grew a little older that the Russians had guns as well, rifles, machine guns, etc. But they never pointed them at people. They always pointed them into the ground. That's one of the things I learned as a memory when I got a little older. In addition, that was the first time I was on snow. And interestingly enough, that was the first time I saw other little kids and we played together. And we threw snow at each other. That was my positive memory. I don't share negative memories, by the way, so I won't go into that. Okay, come on. I couldn't find an actual photograph of the housing that we had in Siberia. That's about as close as I could find based on my parents' descriptions. It was a barracks, and usually 4 families were in one barracks. The barracks was divided with bed sheets to separate visually the 4 families. The stove was in the middle, and it was on 24 hours a day, because you couldn't let the stove peter out on you, because it was very chilly. Just to give you an example, there was only 1 month in the year that was above freezing. Snow drifts were anywhere from 9 to 16 feet high on any given day. Okay, so the kids were mostly indoors, and the older kids started being the teachers of the younger kids. And without going into too much detail, I want to give you one example. My older brother wound up being a pretty good tutor. What he would do is get sawdust that my dad would bring in from the sawmill, and he would spread it out on the floor, and using a stick, he would teach me and other little kids different symbols, signs, numbers, etc. So that was my first education in terms of pre-kindergarten. Okay? They were very clever because the parents, all adults were in the lumber mills. The kids took care of themselves in some fashion or another. And I can tell you all kinds of stories if I had a lot of hours. This is a picture of the a lumber mill. I'm not sure whether this is the one we were at or not. That's the best I could find. Okay, come on. Okay, here's another picture. Interestingly enough, this is a picture of my older brother and me. As you can see, we're well dressed, we're well fed. They really took care of the kids because they wanted the parents to work. And the parents worked from early morning to late at night in the lumber mills. And they also received a certain amount of money, Russian rubles, for working in the lumber mills. So anyway, there were some examples of kids' games, I guess, or instructional programs. Okay. Once we were let out of the lumber camp, we were given passes to allow us to travel through Russia, and we traveled a long time. We wound up going to Kazakhstan, which was part of Russia at that time. Well, it still is, come to think of it. And we spent a couple of years in Kazakhstan. My mom wound up working on the open markets. My dad wound up working in a military manufacturing plant. But our goal was to get to Berlin, where we heard the rumors that if you got to the American sector of Berlin, the displaced people could get some help in relocating somewhere. So the goal was to travel back west, and my parents' goal was to go through Poland again to see if they had any living relatives left alive, and they didn't find any. And this is a picture of my older brother and me in Berlin. And I have a very good memory of Berlin. The first time I had chocolate was in Berlin. That was my memory, because every soldier, GI, that was in Berlin had candy bars to give to little kids. So that was just a plus, an immediate relationship there with candy. And it continues this way for my adulthood as well. Okay. Sorry, time is running out. We were in Berlin a very short period of time because that was kind of a distribution center where they moved people to different parts of the world. And we were moved to a place called Fehrenwald, which was one of 20-some displaced persons camps at that time. The difference between a displaced person and a refugee, a displaced person has no place to go back to. A refugee has a place to go back to. Okay. So at that time, we were called displaced persons. And we were sent to a camp called Fehrenwald, which was kind of almost in the middle of Germany. And ironically, you won't be able to see it, but all of the streets are named after states. So you have, like Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois. And ironically, the Gingold family wound up being in 14 Illinois Street. And we were there for about 6 years. Okay. And all kinds of other stories with a camp. I'm running kind of out of time here. This is a boat, the actual picture of the boat that the Gingolds came on to the United States. It was a military transport. And I don't know if there's another, it took about 10 days to get from Bremenhaven, Germany to New York. And we passed the Statue of Liberty. The kids had a ball on the ship, just ran wild while everybody was throwing out. And interestingly enough, this was a military ship. They got all of the adults that could work painting the ship. So I even have a picture of my dad on the scaffold on the outside of the ship while it's moving. He was painting it. So everybody was doing something on the ship to keep them busy. This happens to be Ellis Island, where almost all refugees and displaced persons came to the United States. I'll go through, and I have some interesting memories, but we won't go into that here. Okay, let's see where we are. This is, we came to the United States in 1951 during the summer in May, I think, somewhere in that area. And that's a picture of me in the fall of that year. I'm about your age. And I never went to school before that. So I started my junior high learning the ABCs. And I have to tell you a real quick story here. When we moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this is where we were sent once we left Ellis Island. And the reason for that was that Milwaukee had a lot of jobs for basically unskilled labor. And both my parents were unskilled labor. So it was a natural for them to be sent there. And they got jobs almost immediately. So I had all kinds of free time because we're both working. My brother was a little older. He decided he didn't want to go to school or be tutored. So he found a job as well. So I was being tutored once or twice a week. So I had a lot of free time. And one of the things that I did, because I had receptive parents, is that I would prepare a lunch and I would take the bus to downtown Milwaukee, where all of the movie theaters were located. And the movies would start like 11 in the morning and kept on repeating and repeating until they closed late at night. And I would sit there anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day that I wasn't being tutored, watching movies. And most of the movies that I was watching were cowboy movies. So I picked up some slang there. Okay. Yeah. The other thing that happened is when we moved to Milwaukee, we were sent and lived in an all-black community. We were one of the few white people in an all-black Milwaukee ghetto. So all of my friends either beat up on me or became friends of mine. And I had two friends. I have to tell you this story real quickly here. One was a big fellow. I'll just use their first names. His first name was Ben, a husky kid, like some of you here. And the other one's Kenny. He was a squirrely kid, very slender, always in motion. Everything he did was fast. He couldn't stand still for a minute. So I guess it could be, a hyperactive youngster. Anyway, they became my best friends. One, they helped avoid me being beat up periodically, so they protected me to some extent. They also became my tutors in trying to learn English because I never went to school until junior high. So anyway, to make the long story short, when I became more of an adult, I tried to look them up because we got separated when we went to the high school after junior high. And so I found out when I must have been in my late 20s, what happened to those two kids that were my best friends. And Ben, the big husky kid, was in prison. Didn't know for what or for how long. And the squirrely Kenny kid, he got 2 degrees in engineering from Marquette University and was on the United States Olympic track team. So, you never know what life can deal you. You just hope that it does the best it can. And it's almost time to quit. So what I want to do is, without going any further, I'll stop here. And I'd like to entertain any questions that you might have. And we could go from there. Yes, ma'am.
So being displaced, you don't have any family mementos? I mean,
Well, I
pictures, how do you have pictures?
I have pictures of my parents. My dad died when he was 76. So that was relatively young. My mom died when she was 95. And as Carrie mentioned to you, there's this book that's published by my nephew, Jeffrey. He's the son of my oldest brother. One of the things that he did is he interviewed my older brother and my mother while they were still alive over a number of years, and he recorded all of the interviews. And that's how he came about with the book, and he also did research. He went to different libraries and countries, etc., to be sure that he could validate some of the information. So anyway, I have pictures of while we were in the United States, but not too much from prior to coming to the United States, or any mementos from, yeah. All we have are some memories, some good, some not so good. Okay, other questions? Yes,
You attended high school,
yes,
caught up, but obviously.
yeah.
And went on to.
Yeah, let me just say, as I mentioned earlier, education is a very important thing to most Jewish parents, and I'm sure it's probably true to non-Jewish parents as well. Get as much education as you can, whether it's formal or informal. Learn, learn, learn. I was fortunate enough that for some reason I kept on learning too much. And that's about all I can say. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to attend good schools. I had good teachers before I started going to the universities. So I have to blame my high school teachers because they were good. They really were good. They took an interest in trying to enhance my education. And there's a side story to that, because I went to a boys' trade and technical school in Milwaukee, which was sometimes called, well, I won't use that name, but it was mostly for kids that got booted out of other high schools that weren't maybe academically oriented. So when I finished the 10th grade, I had the opportunity to meet with a number of my teachers on a real good discussion and the principal. And I said, maybe I don't want to be an electrician or a carpenter or a plumber, etc. I said, I am interested in more education aside from going to the trades at that age. And they were very supportive, and they worked out an arrangement where I could attend another high school that was non-trade or technical in Milwaukee, that was not too far away from where I was attending. So I attended 2 high schools, and I graduated from 2 high schools. So I was very, very fortunate. I had fantastic teachers. Yes? No, I have not, and I have no desire. That's my personal thing. Yes, any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Were there other areas in Poland that the Jews were congregated at, or was
No, one of the efforts that the Nazi regime made was to concentrate the Jewish people in different ghettos. And there were a number of other ghettos, but the Warsaw Ghetto was the most infamous one that had the largest population, because the death rate was just phenomenal there. And the reason was very simple. They didn't want to use bullets. They wanted to starve the people. Other questions? Well, you've been a wonderful listening group of folks. I hope, I have a chance to visit some of your schools, because I really enjoy talking with youngsters of all ages, usually 10 years and older. And there I have a chance to really interact with questions and answers and try to get things a little more motivated. But you're a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for the church to allow me to come here and share, a few tidbits about the Gingold family and some of the times that we had during the Second World War. Thank you very much.
Put it in the basket, the books are back there. Do you have other announcements?
I did. For those of you who can stick around, we do have coffee and lemonade and some snacks downstairs. You're welcome to hang out, have conversations, and then go home. You don't have to leave right now, except for you guys. You guys have to go. Well, that's the same interfere there.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, my
My daughter came up to you. She said, because, and I said, I've never been
I know everybody has said that, but don't get used to it. It's my funeral tire.
I've never been captured by the Japanese, and it's just so experience he didn't sense of humor. Right? He takes several. I got you a good one. You want one too? What opportunity you have every day. You ready?